I'm glad to have you here. Follow my story until the end and comment the city you're watching from. The call came at 6:47 on a Tuesday morning. I was already awake, nursing my second cup of coffee and watching the snow fall outside my kitchen window in Toronto. The number on my phone showed my brother's name, Jonathan. We hadn't spoken in 3 weeks, not since our last tense visit to Mom's nursing home. Nancy? His voice had that false solemnity that immediately put me on edge. I set down my coffee mug, my hands suddenly unsteady. Something was wrong. Very wrong. I have some difficult news. He continued, his tone shifting to something almost businesslike. Mom passed away last night, peacefully in her sleep. The world tilted. What, when I was just planning to visit her today? The funeral is Friday, he cut me off. I've already made the arrangements. Then his voice turned cold. Oh, and Nancy, about Mom's estate. The will is very clear. Everything goes to me. The house in Richmond Hill, the cottage in Muskoka, her investments. All of it. You get nothing. Don't even think about contesting it. Then he hung up. I stood there in my kitchen, staring at the phone in disbelief. My mother. Dead. Just like that. And Jonathan's first priority was to inform me I was getting nothing. Not I'm sorry, not she went peacefully, but a threat not to contest the will. Something was very, very wrong. Let me back up. My name is Nancy Reynolds. I'm 62 years old, a retired elementary school teacher who spent 35 years shaping young minds in the Toronto District School Board. My husband Michael passed away 3 years ago in a car accident on the 401. One moment we were planning our retirement travels, the next I was a widow. We had 2 children. David, 30 years old, is a pediatrician in Vancouver. He has his father's gentle way with people, his calm presence that makes everyone feel safe. Then there's Lisa, 27, an architect here in Toronto. She's got my stubborn streak and Michael's creativity. After Michael died, I threw myself into my grandchildren and staying close to Mom. She'd been my rock through the grief. My brother Jonathan is 4 years younger than me, 58. We grew up close enough, sharing secrets and scraped knees in our old house in North York. But as adults, we drifted. Jonathan became a real estate agent, married Jennifer, had 2 kids. On the surface, everything looked fine, but I'd noticed things over the years. Jonathan was always chasing the next big deal, always stretching himself thin financially. His business had rough patches. There were whispered conversations at family dinners about investments that went south, about Jennifer working double shifts as a nurse to keep them afloat. But Jonathan never asked for help. Pride, maybe. Or shame. Our mother, Helen Reynolds, was 83 and had been sharp as a tack her entire life. A retired teacher like me, she could still recite Frost and Dickinson from memory and beat anyone at Scrabble. She lived independently in her home in Richmond Hill until about 4 months ago, when Jonathan convinced her she needed extra help. Mom, he'd said at our last family dinner together, his voice dripping with concern. You're 83. What if you forget to pay a bill? What if something happens and no one knows? Let me be your power of attorney, just to help with the paperwork. I'd felt uneasy then. Mom's doing fine. She doesn't need Nancy. Jonathan had given me that look, the one that said I was being overprotective, that I didn't understand the real world of finances and legal matters. It's just a precaution. Mom agrees, don't you? Mom had patted his hand. It's all right, dear. Jonathan's just trying to help. That's when everything changed. Within 2 weeks of Jonathan getting the POA, Mom was suddenly diagnosed with severe cognitive decline. Jonathan moved her into Maple Grove Care Center, saying she couldn't live alone anymore. When I visited that first time, I was shocked. My vibrant, witty mother sat in a chair by the window, staring vacantly at the parking lot. She didn't recognize me. She barely spoke. When she did, it was confused, fragmented sentences that trailed off into nothing. Is this really possible? I'd asked her Dr. Thomas Whitmore, a silver-haired man with too smooth bedside manner. She was fine a month ago. We had lunch. She was telling me about the book she'd just finished. Dementia can progress very rapidly, in some cases, Mrs. Reynolds, he said, not quite meeting my eyes. The cognitive decline in patients her age can be quite sudden. We see it more often than you'd think. But it didn't sit right with me. The change was too dramatic, too fast. I visited Mom 3 times a week anyway. Even when she didn't know who I was, I'd sit beside her, hold her hand, brush her thinning gray hair. I'd bring her favorite lavender soap from the shop on Queen Street. I'd read her poetry, Dickinson's Hope is the Thing with Feathers, Frost's The Road Not Taken. Sometimes I'd just talk about Lisa's latest project about David's kids in Vancouver, about the small moments of my days. Jonathan visited too, but less frequently. When he did, he always seemed rushed, always checking his watch, always asking the staff about paperwork, about Mom's accounts, about her medications. Now, standing in my kitchen with Jonathan's words still ringing in my ears, I realized what I'd been too blind to see. This wasn't grief talking. This was greed. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely dial. I called Maple Grove Care Center immediately. "Good morning, Maple Grove. How may I help you?" The receptionist's voice was bright, cheerful. "I'm calling about my mother, Helen Reynolds," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "I just heard she passed away last night." There was a pause. "I'm sorry, Mrs. Reynolds, Nancy Reynolds. My brother Jonathan just called to tell me our mother died." "Let me check our records." I heard typing. Another pause, longer this time. "Ma'am, I don't show any—" "Let me check with the nursing station. Can you hold—" My heart started pounding. The hold music was some tinny version of What a Wonderful World. It felt obscene. "Mrs. Reynolds," a different voice, now older, more authoritative. "This is Nurse Patricia Okonjo. I'm the head nurse on your mother's floor. I'm not sure what information you received, but your mother is fine. She's having breakfast right now in the dining room." The room spun. I sat down heavily on one of my kitchen chairs. "She's alive?" "Yes, ma'am. Is there some confusion? Can you do me a favor?" My voice came out as a whisper. "Don't tell anyone I called, especially not my brother." I hung up and immediately called Lisa. She answered on the second ring, her voice groggy. "Mom, it's barely 7. What's wrong?" "Your uncle just told me Grandma died, but she didn't. She's alive, Lisa. I think Jonathan is trying to steal her estate." There was a beat of silence. Then Lisa's voice, sharp and clear now. "Mom, that's elder abuse. That's fraud. What are you going to do?" "I don't know yet, but I need to figure this out fast. He said the funeral is Friday. That's 3 days from now." After talking to Lisa, I spent the morning making calls. First, I contacted a lawyer Michael and I had worked with years ago on a real estate matter. Robert Davis, a meticulous man in his late 50s who'd been a friend of Michael's. "Nancy," he said when I finished explaining, "this is serious. If your brother has power of attorney and is misrepresenting your mother's condition or misappropriating her assets, we're talking about criminal charges. But you need evidence. Solid evidence." "What kind of evidence?" "Financial records showing unauthorized transfers, medical documentation, witnesses. Anything that proves fraud or elder abuse." He paused. "I'll be honest with you. These cases are difficult. Adult children with POA have a lot of leeway, but faking a death, planning a fraudulent funeral, that crosses a major line." Next, I hired a private investigator. Sarah Mitchell came recommended by Robert. She arrived at my house that afternoon, a sharp-eyed woman in her mid-40s with silver threading through her dark hair. "How long has your brother had POA?" she asked, taking notes in a leather-bound notebook. 4 months, right after Mom supposedly developed dementia. And before that, your mother was competent. Completely. She was volunteering at the library twice a week. She had a bridge club. She was reading 2 books a week and doing the New York Times crossword every Sunday." Sarah nodded slowly. "I've seen cases like this. Adult children see their parents as piggy banks, especially when they're in financial trouble. Give me 48 hours. I'll find out what's happening with your mother's finances." That evening, I drove to Maple Grove. I didn't tell them I was coming. The building was one of those newer facilities that tried too hard to look cheerful. Bright paint motivational quotes on the walls, silk flowers in every corner. It felt sterile despite the attempts at warmth. When I got to Mom's room on the 3rd floor, she was sitting in her usual chair by the window, staring out at the darkening sky. The snow had picked up fat flakes drifting past the glass. Her gray hair was thinner than I remembered, her face more lined. She wore a cardigan I didn't recognize, pale blue and slightly too large. "Mom," I said softly, pulling up the visitor's chair beside her. "It's me, Nancy." She turned slowly. Those familiar brown eyes, my eyes met mine. For just a moment, I could have sworn I saw something there. Recognition, awareness. Or was I imagining it, wanting so badly to find my real mother still in there? "It's me," I repeated, reaching for her hand. Her skin was papery cool. Your daughter, Nancy. She blinked. Her mouth worked like she wanted to say something, but no words came out. Then a nurse came in to check her vitals, and whatever moment we'd had was gone. I drove home through the snow, my mind racing. What was Jonathan planning a fake funeral to convince everyone Mom was dead? Then what, transfer all her assets while everyone thought she was gone? Forge death certificates. It was insane. It was also, I was realizing, potentially brilliant in its audacity. Who would question a grief-stricken son arranging his mother's funeral? Sarah called me the next morning. Wednesday. 2 days before the supposed funeral. Nancy, you need to sit down. I was already at my kitchen table, but I gripped the edge anyway. What did you find? Your brother has been very busy. I could hear papers rustling. In the past 4 months, he's transferred approximately $340,000 from your mother's accounts into his own. He sold her cottage in Muskoka to a numbered company for well below market value. I'm still tracing the ownership, but I'd bet money he's behind it. He's been drawing on her credit cards to the tune of $45,000. And Nancy, he's taken out a second mortgage on her house in Richmond Hill. I felt sick. How much? $200,000. The house was paid off. He's essentially stolen over $500,000 in 4 months. Oh my God. There's more. Sarah's voice was grim. I did some digging on Dr. Whitmore, the doctor who diagnosed your mother's dementia. He and your brother went to University of Toronto together. They've been friends for 30 years. They play golf at the same club. Their kids went to the same summer camps. The room felt too small suddenly. So Mom's dementia could be medication-induced, yes. If she's being overprescribed sedatives or antipsychotics, it would explain the sudden cognitive decline and the vacant behavior. I can't prove it yet, but it's a strong possibility. That's attempted murder. That's what we need to prove. I'm getting copies of her medical records, but that takes time. In the meantime, I'd suggest you visit your mother again. Document everything. And Nancy, record any conversations with your brother if you can. Ontario's a one-party consent province for recording. That afternoon, I was back at Maple Grove. I'd brought my phone ready to record anything suspicious. But when I got to Mom's room, it was empty. A nurse I didn't recognize was changing the sheets. Where's my mother? I asked, panic rising in my chest like floodwater. Oh, Mrs. Reynolds, your brother took her out for a drive. He said she needed some air. She smiled, oblivious to my horror. It's nice that he takes such good care of her. My blood ran cold. Wynette, about an hour ago. I ran to the parking lot. Jonathan's black Mercedes was gone. I tried calling him. No answer. I called 5 times. Nothing. 3 hours later, they finally returned. I'd been sitting in my car the whole time watching the entrance, my anxiety building with every passing minute. When Jonathan's Mercedes finally pulled up, I was out of my car before he'd even put it in park. Jonathan helped Mom out of the passenger seat. She looked exhausted, confused. She shuffled as he supported her, her movements slow and uncertain. Jonathan? My voice came out harder than I'd intended. He looked up, and for just a second I saw something flash across his face. Annoyance, fear, then it was gone, replaced by a bland smile. Nancy, what are you doing here? You said Mom died yesterday, yet here she is. He had the audacity to laugh. A short, sharp bark. Oh, that. Yeah, sorry about the confusion. I meant to call you back. False alarm. Mom had a bad episode yesterday, and I thought, well, you know how it is with dementia. These things happen. Where did you take her today? Just for a drive. She likes getting out, seeing the city. He was guiding Mom toward the entrance, now his hand firm on her elbow. Really? Because she looks like she can barely stand. He stopped, then turned to face me. His smile was gone. Back off, Nancy. I'm her power of attorney. I make the decisions about her care, not you. You want to challenge that, get a lawyer. He brushed past me, helping Mom into the building. Through the glass doors, I watched him settle her into her wheelchair, speaking to her in a low voice I couldn't hear. Then he left, walking right past me in the parking lot without a word. I stood there in the cold, watching snow melt on the windshield of my car. My phone buzzed. An unknown number. I almost ignored it, but something made me answer. Hello. Silence. Then a whisper so faint I had to press the phone hard against my ear. A woman's voice, scratchy and strained. Nancy. Yes. Who is this? Nancy. It's me. The voice was so quiet, so distorted, I couldn't place it. Who? It's your mother. My heart stopped. That couldn't be right. Mom was right there in the building, and this call was coming from... I checked the screen. A blocked number. Nancy, listen carefully. The voice was stronger now, more urgent. I don't have much time. I need you to come to my room tonight. Late, after 10. Make sure Jonathan isn't here. Mom, is that really? And Nancy, don't tell anyone about this call. Not yet. Promise me. I promise, but the line went dead. I sat in the parking lot for another hour, my mind reeling. That couldn't have been Mom. Mom could barely string 2 words together. She didn't recognize me. She lived in a fog of confusion and medication. And yet, that voice, even whispered and strained, there had been something familiar about it. Something that reminded me of the mother I'd known my whole life. The sharp, clear-minded woman who'd taught me to read, who'd stayed up with me through my first heartbreak, who'd held my hand at Michael's funeral. At 9:30, I drove home, had a quick dinner I barely tasted, then drove back to Maple Grove. I waited in the parking lot until after 10, watching the windows. The night shift had taken over. Jonathan's car was long gone. I used my visitor code to enter through the side door and made my way up to the 3rd floor. The hallway was quiet, just the soft beep of monitors and the distant sound of a television. Mom's room was at the end of the corridor. I knocked softly. No answer. I pushed the door open. Mom was sitting up in bed, the lights low. When I entered, she turned to look at me, and in that moment, everything I thought I knew shattered. Her eyes were clear, sharp, completely lucid. This wasn't the vacant stare I'd seen for 4 months. This was my mother, the real Helen Reynolds. "Close the door, sweetheart," she said in a normal voice, not the confused mumble I'd heard for months. A normal, strong voice, the voice of a woman fully in control of her faculties. I shut the door, my hands shaking. "Mom, what's happening?" My mother, who I'd thought was lost in the fog of dementia, smiled at me. Actually smiled. It was that wry expression I remembered from childhood, the one she'd worn when she caught me and Jonathan sneaking cookies before dinner. "Sit down, Nancy. We need to talk, and we don't have much time." I sat in the chair beside her bed, feeling like the world had tilted on its axis. "Mom, I don't understand. Are you okay?" "The dementia, the diagnosis, I'm fine, sweetheart. I've been fine this whole time." "But you couldn't recognize me. You barely spoke." "How, because I was pretending." The room seemed to spin. Pretending, she reached over and took my hand. Her grip was firm, steady, nothing like the weak, trembling hands I'd held for months. "Nancy, I'm 83 years old. I've been thinking a lot about mortality lately, about what happens when I'm gone, and I realized I needed to know something." She paused, her eyes searching mine. "I needed to know which of my children would actually take care of me. Not for my money, not for inheritance, but because they loved me. So you faked dementia to test us." When Jonathan suggested becoming my power of attorney, I saw an opportunity. She squeezed my hand. I agreed, but I also consulted my own lawyer, someone Jonathan doesn't know about. Benjamin Parker. I put most of my assets in an irrevocable trust weeks before Jonathan got the POA. The accounts he has access to, I only left enough in them to see what he'd do. I couldn't process this. My mind felt like it was moving through molasses. "Mom, why didn't you tell me?" Her eyes grew sad. "Because I had to test both of you, sweetheart. I had to see who would visit me when I couldn't give them anything back. Who would hold my hand even when I didn't know their name. Who would brush my hair and read me poetry when I couldn't respond." Tears were streaming down my face now. "Of course I came. You're my mother. I love you." "I know that now." Her voice was soft. "And Nancy, you came 3 times a week. Every Tuesday, Thursday, and Saturday. You sat with me. You talked to me. You brought me lavender soap because you remembered it was my favorite, even when I acted like I had no idea who you were." "But Jonathan—" The words caught in my throat. "Jonathan failed." She shook her head, and I saw tears in her eyes now, too. "Worse than I ever imagined. Nancy, I've been documenting everything. Every time he came to pressure me to sign papers. Every time he got angry when I played confused. Every time he took something from this room thinking I wouldn't notice." She gestured to a small device hidden in the lamp on her bedside table. "I have it all recorded. Every conversation. Every threat. Sarah, the private investigator I hired, she found out he's stolen over $500,000. $340,000 from the accounts I left accessible," Mom confirmed. I've been letting him dig his own grave. But Nancy, there's more. He told me today during our drive that I was going to have an accident, that I'd pass away peacefully. He wanted me to sign papers first transferring the house, but I refused. Played confused. He's running out of time and he knows it. This is insane. This is dangerous. Mom, we need to call the police right now. No, not yet. She held up a hand. Robert Davis, your lawyer. He's been my lawyer too for the past month. We have a plan. But Nancy, I need you to trust me. Can you do that? I looked at my mother, this remarkable woman who'd orchestrated an elaborate test to find the truth, and I nodded. Always. Over the next 2 days, we set everything up. Robert brought in the police, but quietly. Detective James Morrison, a tired-looking man in his 50s who'd seen every kind of family betrayal, agreed to let Mom's plan play out. Mrs. Reynolds, he said, sitting in Robert's office, what you're describing is elaborate. We'll need airtight evidence. I have 127 hours of audio and video recordings, Mom said calmly. Financial records showing the theft. Medical records I had my real doctor, Catherine Walsh, document monthly to prove I'm of sound mind. And 3 nurses at Maple Grove who've been helping me maintain the charade. They've kept meticulous notes. Why not just report him 4 months ago? Mom's face was serene. Because then I wouldn't have known the full extent of what he'd do. And more importantly, I wouldn't have known who truly loved me. This wasn't just about catching a thief detective. It was about understanding what my family really is. We installed additional hidden cameras in Mom's room. Tiny things Sarah helped set up no bigger than buttons. We coordinated with the nurses we could trust Patricia Okonjo Maria Santos and Yuki Tanaka. And Mom continued her act, playing the confused, declining patient whenever Jonathan was around. Jonathan came twice more. Thursday morning he brought papers for Mom to sign. Transfer documents for her house. Mom scribbled something illegible, acted like she didn't understand what she was doing. Just sign clearly, Mom, he said, and I heard it all on the recording later. His frustration was barely contained. His voice had an edge that made my skin crawl. I'm trying to help you. This is for your own good. Thursday night he came again. This time he brought Amy, his 22-year-old daughter. My niece looked tired, worried. She held her grandmother's hand and talked about her classes at York University. After Amy left, Jonathan stayed. I watched the video footage later, and it made me physically ill. He pulled out a small container of pills. Time for your medication, Mom, he said. But we'd had the pills tested through a contact of Sarah's. Massive doses of sedatives, enough to keep Mom in a fog for days. Mom pretended to take them, but palmed them instead, a trick one of the nurses had taught her. Tomorrow, Jonathan said, smoothing Mom's hair in a gesture that would have seemed loving if you didn't know the truth. Tomorrow you'll finally be at peace. No more suffering. Friday morning came. I'd barely slept. Lisa had flown in the night before and was staying at my house. David was trying to get a flight from Vancouver, but was stuck in weather delays. Jonathan had booked Thornhill Funeral Home on Yonge Street, one of the most prestigious in the city. He'd sent out notices to the whole family. Cousins I hadn't seen in years called me offering condolences. I played along. Yes, thank you. It was very sudden. The funeral is at 2. At noon, Lisa and I drove to the funeral home. Jonathan had gone all out. The main chapel was filled with flowers, white lilies, roses, chrysanthemums. He'd placed a large photo of Mom at the front, one taken about 20 years ago when she still taught full-time. In it, she was smiling, vibrant, full of life. He'd even written an obituary that the funeral home had printed on cards by the entrance. Helen Margaret Reynolds, beloved mother and grandmother, passed peacefully on January 7th after a long illness. She was a dedicated teacher who shaped countless young minds over 35 years. She will be deeply missed. The sheer audacity of it took my breath away. People started arriving at 1:30. Aunt Margaret, Dad's sister, now in her 80s herself. Cousin Stephen and his family from Mississauga. Former colleagues from Mom's teaching days. Neighbors from her old house in Richmond Hill. Jonathan had done his homework. He'd contacted everyone. Jennifer arrived with their son Mark, a quiet 25-year-old who worked in IT. But I noticed Amy came separately, her eyes red from crying. She hugged me tight. Aunt Nancy, she whispered. Something's wrong. Dad won't tell me anything, but something feels wrong. I squeezed her hand. Just trust me, sweetheart. Everything is going to be okay. At exactly 2 o'clock, the funeral director, a solemn man in an expensive suit, asked everyone to take their seats. The chapel was packed, easily 80 people. Jonathan had even arranged for a minister I didn't recognize to officiate. The service began with Amazing Grace playing softly. Several people were already crying. Jennifer dabbed at her eyes with a tissue. Mark stared straight ahead, his jaw tight. Then Jonathan stood up to give the eulogy. He walked to the podium, adjusted the microphone, and began to speak. We're here today to celebrate the life of Helen Margaret Reynolds, born February 14, 1942, passed away January 7, 2025. His voice caught with emotion that I now knew was completely false. Mom was an incredible woman, a teacher who shaped young minds for 35 years, a mother who always put her children first. He paused, letting the silence build. And in her final months, she trusted me to care for her. She knew I would protect her interests, manage her affairs, ensure she was comfortable. Another pause. Mom always told me I was special to her. She said so many times. She knew I was the responsible one, the one who would take care of everything. My hands were clenched so tight in my lap that my nails dug into my palms. Lisa put her hand over mine. She wanted me to have her house, Jonathan continued, her cottage, everything she'd worked for, because she trusted me to use it wisely, to take care of the family. I couldn't take it anymore. I stood up. Every head in the room turned. That's interesting, Jonathan, I said loudly, my voice carrying through the chapel. Why don't you tell everyone where Mom really is right now? Confusion rippled through the room like a wave. People turned to each other, whispering. Aunt Margaret clutched her chest. Cousin Stephen half rose from his seat. Jonathan's face went white, then red. Nancy, sit down. This isn't the time. Where's the body, Jonathan? I took a step toward the aisle. Where's Mom's body? She's being cremated. We discussed this. His voice was tight, controlled, but I could see his hands trembling on the podium. Really, because I called Green Meadows Crematorium this morning. They don't have her. In fact, they have no record of receiving any body from Maple Grove Care Center. Jennifer stood up. Nancy, you're clearly in shock. I need to what? Sit quietly while my brother commits fraud. I looked around the room at all the confused, concerned faces. My mother isn't dead. She's alive. This entire funeral is a lie. That's insane, Jonathan said, but his voice cracked. Mom died. I was there. The doctor pronounced her. The doors at the back of the chapel opened. Everyone turned. There, framed in the doorway, backlit by the afternoon sun streaming through the funeral home's windows, stood my mother. She walked slowly, using a walker, but her back was straight. Her eyes were clear and sharp. She wore a simple black dress and her favorite pearl necklace, the one my father had given her on their 40th anniversary. Behind her, 2 police officers in uniform followed at a respectful distance. Someone screamed. I think it was Aunt Margaret. People jumped to their feet. Mark gasped. Amy burst into tears. Mom made her way down the aisle slowly, deliberately. Every eye in the room followed her. The only sound was the soft tap of her walker on the carpeted floor and the gasps and whispers of 80 shocked mourners. When she reached Jonathan, she stopped. They stood face to face, mother and son, accuser and accused. Hello, son, she said clearly, her voice carrying through the silent chapel. I'm not dead, but your inheritance is. Jonathan's mouth opened and closed. No sound came out. His face had gone from red to ashen. He grabbed the podium for support. Mom, he finally managed. You're confused. You're sick. This is a mistake. You need to sit down. I'm not confused, Jonathan. Mom's voice was steady, strong. I've been recording everything for the past 4 months. Every threat, every theft, every time you tried to get me to sign documents transferring my assets to you, every time you drugged me to keep me compliant. She turned to face the assembled crowd. Many of them were crying now, some in relief, others in shock at the unfolding drama. I'm sorry for deceiving all of you, Mom said, but I had to know the truth. I had to see what my son would do when he thought I was helpless, when he thought no one was watching. Her voice wavered slightly. And what I found broke my heart. One of the police officers stepped forward. He was younger than his partner, maybe early 30s, with kind eyes that had seen too much. Jonathan Reynolds, you're under arrest for elder abuse theft, over $5,000 fraud, and attempted probate fraud. You have the right to remain silent. Jonathan tried to run. He actually pushed away from the podium and tried to bolt for the side exit. But he only made it 3 steps before the second officer, a woman with iron gray hair, caught him. They handcuffed him right there in front of everyone. His kids were sobbing. Mark had his face in his hands. Amy ran to Mom and threw her arms around her, careful not to knock over the walker. "Grandma," Amy cried. "I didn't know. I swear I didn't know what Dad was doing." Mom stroked her hair. "I know, sweetheart. I know." Jennifer stood frozen, her face a mask of horror. Or was it? I watched her carefully. She'd gone pale, yes, but there was something in her eyes. Calculation, fear of being caught. As they led Jonathan away, he shouted back at Mom, "I'm your son. You can't do this to me. I needed that money. You don't understand, I needed it." Mom watched him go, tears streaming down her face, but her voice was steady when she spoke. "You were my son, but you stopped being my child the moment you decided my life was worth less than my bank account." The funeral home erupted into chaos. The funeral director stood helplessly unsure what to do. The minister had quietly slipped away. People crowded around Mom, asking if she was all right, if she needed to sit down, what had happened. Detective Morrison, who'd been in the crowd the whole time watching, stepped forward. "Folks, if you could please give Mrs. Reynolds some space. This has been a difficult day for her." Robert Davis appeared at my side. "Nancy, we need to get your mother somewhere quiet. She's exhausted." I looked at Mom. Despite her clear eyes and steady voice, I could see the toll this was taking. Her shoulders had started to droop. Her hand on the walker was trembling slightly. "Let's get you home, Mom," I said softly. She nodded. "Yes, I'd like that." Lisa drove us back to my house in her car while Robert followed in his. We settled Mom in my living room on the couch with pillows propped behind her. I made tea, Earl Grey her favorite, and we sat in the quiet afternoon light filtering through my windows. "Mom," I said finally, "when did you know about Jonathan?" She sipped her tea, gathering her thoughts. 2 years ago. Maybe longer if I'm honest with myself. I just didn't want to see it." "What happened 2 years ago?" "He came to me, asked for $50,000, said he had an investment opportunity that couldn't miss, real estate deal that would triple his money." She smiled sadly. "I gave it to him. No questions asked. He was my son, my baby boy." "Did he pay you back?" "No. 6 months later, I saw a notice from the Ontario Problem Gambling Helpline among his mail at a family dinner. He'd left it on my kitchen counter. That's when I started paying attention. Really paying attention." Lisa sat on the floor at Mom's feet. "What did you see?" "Everything." Mom set down her teacup. "The expensive clothes that didn't match his income. The way he and Jennifer would have whispered arguments about money at every family gathering. The fact that their kids didn't know basic things like Amy couldn't afford textbooks, but her father drove a Mercedes." "But you didn't say anything," I said. "What could I say, son? I think you have a gambling problem." He would have denied it. Gotten angry. Cut me out of his life entirely. She looked at me. "Nancy, I've watched enough families destroy themselves over unspoken truths. I wanted proof. I wanted to know exactly who my son had become. So when he suggested the power of attorney, I saw my opportunity." Mom's eyes were distant now, remembering. "I consulted Benjamin Parker, you remember him. He handled your father's estate. I told him what I suspected. We set up the irrevocable trust, moved most of my assets out of Jonathan's reach. Then I agreed to the POA and started pretending to have dementia," Lisa said quietly. "Yes." Mom looked down at her hands. "It was harder than I thought it would be, sitting there pretending not to know my own daughter. Nancy, every time you came to visit, every time you held my hand and read to me, I wanted to tell you. I wanted to say, I'm here, I'm still here. But I couldn't. Not until I knew everything." We sat in silence for a moment. Then I had to ask, "Mom, what if Jonathan had been innocent? What if he'd actually taken care of your money properly?" She smiled. "Then I would have revealed the truth much sooner. Told him it was a test and that he'd passed. Given him a generous gift and made sure he knew how proud I was." Her smile faded. "But he didn't pass Nancy. He failed in ways I never imagined possible. $340,000. I said. That's what Sarah found. Plus the mortgage on my house, the sale of the cottage, the credit cards. Mom ticked them off on her fingers. Total value of what he tried to take, just over $600,000. If I'd actually been incapacitated, if I'd really had dementia, he would have left me with nothing. Lisa looked up. Grandma, why did you let it go so far? The fake funeral that was dangerous. What if something had gone wrong? I had safeguards, Mom said. Detective Morrison knew the plan. Robert was monitoring everything. 3 nurses at Maple Grove were watching out for me, Patricia, Maria, and Yuki. They're good women, underpaid and overworked, but they have integrity. She paused. And I needed the fake funeral. I needed proof of intent. Jonathan planning and executing a fraudulent funeral, that's not a mistake or a misunderstanding. That's calculated fraud. But Jennifer, I said suddenly. Mom, Sarah said Jennifer works at Maple Grove. She must have been involved. Mom's face darkened. Yes, I suspected that early on. Jennifer was the one who first suggested I might need extra help. She'd bring up memory lapses I never had. Tell Jonathan I'd called her by the wrong name, which wasn't true. She was building a case for incompetence. She's a nurse, Lisa said. She would know how to fake symptoms, how to make you seem worse than you were. Exactly. Mom looked at me. Nancy, tomorrow the police are going to arrest Jennifer too. They're building the case now, but they wanted Jonathan first. That evening, Amy came to my house. She stood on my doorstep, her eyes swollen from crying, clutching a folder to her chest. Aunt Nancy, can I come in? I pulled her into a hug. Of course, sweetheart. We sat at my kitchen table. Mom had gone to rest in my guest room. Lisa was there too, making dinner. I brought these, Amy said, sliding the folder across to me. Text messages, between my parents. I found them on Dad's iPad. I opened the folder. The messages were printed out, dated over the past 4 months. Jonathan, she signed the papers today. Barely knew what she was doing. Jennifer, good. How much did you get, Jonathan? Another $80K. I transferred it to the offshore account. Jennifer, we need to move faster. Nancy's visiting too much. She might notice something. My hands were shaking as I read through them. Message after message documenting the theft, the conspiracy. And then dated 3 days ago. Jonathan, it has to be this week. I've already booked the funeral home. Jennifer, are you sure? What if someone finds out, Jonathan, who's going to find out she's already dead on paper? We just need to make it official. Jennifer, what about Nancy, Jonathan? Let her grieve. By the time she thinks to ask questions, it'll be too late. Everything will be transferred. I looked up at Amy. She was crying silently, tears streaming down her face. I didn't know, she whispered. I swear, Aunt Nancy, I thought Grandma was really sick. I thought Dad was helping her. I didn't know they were stealing from her. I didn't know about the fake funeral until this morning when Mom told me to get dressed for it. Oh, sweetheart. I moved around the table and hugged her. This isn't your fault. None of this is your fault. But they're my parents. How could they do this? How could they plan to? She couldn't finish the sentence. She didn't need to. The next morning, Saturday, the police arrested Jennifer at Maple Grove as she arrived for her shift. According to Detective Morrison, she'd tried to play innocent at first. I didn't know what Jonathan was doing, she'd claimed. I'm just a nurse. I was taking care of Helen like any good daughter-in-law. Then they showed her the text messages, the bank records showing she'd been the one to set up the offshore accounts, security footage of her going through Mom's belongings at the nursing home, and the testimony of Patricia, Maria, and Yuki, the 3 nurses who'd been helping Mom. Jennifer Reynolds was over-medicating your mother, Patricia told the police in her statement, which Robert shared with me later. She'd slip extra sedatives into Mrs. Reynolds' evening medication. I saw her do it twice. When I questioned her, she said Dr. Whitmore had ordered it, but when I checked the charts, there was no such order. Jennifer's nursing license was suspended immediately. The College of Nurses was opening their own investigation. She was charged as an accessory to fraud and elder abuse. Mark came to see me that afternoon. Unlike Amy, he hadn't cried much. He seemed numb in shock. Aunt Nancy, he said, sitting in my living room. What's going to happen to them? They'll have a trial. If convicted, they'll likely go to prison. For how long? I looked at Robert, who'd come over to help me deal with the legal aftermath. He adjusted his glasses. Elder abuse with theft over $5,000, Jonathan is looking at 5 to 10 years. Jennifer as an accessory, and for using her position as a healthcare provider to facilitate the crime, probably 3 to 7. Mark's face was blank. Good, I blinked. Mark, they deserve it. His voice was flat. Do you know what Dad told me last week? He said once Grandma was gone, he'd pay off my student loans. Said I wouldn't have to work 2 jobs anymore. Said we'd be set for life. He looked at me. I thought he meant from inheritance. Like Grandma would leave him something and he'd share it. I didn't know he was stealing it. I didn't know he was planning to fake her death. Did you say anything about the student loans? I told him I didn't want his money, that I'd pay my own debts. Mark's jaw tightened. He laughed at me, called me naive, said I'd understand when I was older, when I had real responsibilities. He paused. I'm 25, Aunt Nancy. I work 60 hours a week between 2 jobs to pay for school. I know about responsibility. What I don't know is how to fake someone's death for money. Sunday morning, I took Mom to visit David in Vancouver. We flew out together, first-class Mom's treat, she insisted. David met us at the airport with his kids, 7-year-old Sophie and 5-year-old Ben. Sophie ran to her great-grandmother. Nana, Daddy said you were sick, but now you're better. Mom knelt down slowly, carefully, and hugged her. I'm much better now, sweetheart. At David's house in Kitsilano, we sat on his deck overlooking the water. The kids played in the yard. David's wife Rachel brought out coffee and fresh scones. Mom, David said quietly, why didn't you tell me I could have helped? I could have. You were 3,000 kilometers away, sweetheart. What could you have done? Mom patted his hand. Besides, you have your own family, your own life. I couldn't burden you with this. You're my mother. You're never a burden. I know that now, Mom smiled. But David, I needed to do this myself. I needed to prove to myself as much as anyone that I wasn't helpless, that I was still capable of protecting myself. We spent the whole day there. It was good to see David with his kids, to watch Mom read them stories, to pretend for a few hours that we were just a normal family visiting for the weekend. But that evening, as we sat on the deck after the kids had gone to bed, David asked the question I'd been dreading. What happens now with Jonathan? He goes to trial, I said. Robert says it could be 6 months before it actually happens. There's a lot of evidence to process. Will you have to testify? Probably. So will Mom, and the nurses, and Amy, since she found those text messages. David was quiet for a long moment. I can't believe he did this. I mean, Jonathan was always money-focused, status-conscious, but this planning to fake Mom's death. People do terrible things when they're desperate, Mom said softly. He wasn't desperate, I said, surprised by the anger in my voice. He was greedy. There's a difference. We flew back to Toronto Monday morning. When we got to my house, there was a car in the driveway I didn't recognize. A woman got out as we pulled up, mid-40s, professional-looking in a navy blazer. Mrs. Reynolds, Nancy Reynolds, yes. I'm Linda Walsh from CBC News. I was hoping I could talk to you about your brother's arrest. The story of your mother faking dementia to catch her son stealing from her, it's generating a lot of interest. Mom stepped forward. Young lady, I appreciate your interest, but my family and I need privacy right now. I understand, Mrs. Reynolds, but your story could help others. Elder abuse is... I'm aware of how common it is, Mom said firmly. I've lived it, and when I'm ready to share my story publicly, I will, but not today. Linda Walsh handed me a business card. When you're ready, please call me. This story deserves to be told. After she left, I looked at Mom. Are you going to talk to the press? Eventually, maybe. She seemed tired suddenly. Nancy, this isn't just about Jonathan anymore. There are thousands of elderly people being abused by their own children. If my story helps even one person recognize the warning signs, speak up, protect themselves, then maybe something good came out of all this. Over the next few weeks, life settled into a strange new normal. Mom moved into a condo near my house, a nice 2-bedroom in a building with good security and an active seniors community. She was done with the big house in Richmond Hill. Too many memories, she said. Too much to maintain. Amy and Mark came to visit often. Amy had moved out of her parents' house and was staying with friends while she figured things out. Mark kept working his 2 jobs, but he seemed lighter somehow, like a weight had been lifted. Aunt Nancy, Amy said one evening as we cooked dinner together in my kitchen, can I ask you something? Of course. Why do you think Dad did it? I mean, I know about the gambling. I know about the debts. But to actually plan to fake Grandma's death, that's not just about money anymore. That's something darker. I thought about it while I chopped vegetables. I think your father got trapped in a lie. First the gambling, then the debts, then the desperate attempts to cover up the debts. Each step seemed justified to him because of the step before. Before he knew it, he'd gone so far down that terrible path that faking Mom's death actually seemed like a solution. That's not an excuse, Amy said fiercely. No, it's not. It's an explanation. There's a difference. I looked at her. Amy, you can understand how someone made their choices without forgiving them for it. You can have compassion for how they got lost without excusing where they ended up. She was quiet for a moment. Do you think he'll ever be sorry? Really sorry? I don't know, sweetheart. I hope so, but that's something he has to figure out for himself. 6 weeks after the arrest, Robert called me. Nancy, Jonathan wants to see you. He's requested a meeting at the detention center. My stomach churned. I don't know if I can face him. You don't have to, but he says he has something to tell you. Something about your mother. That got my attention. What about her? He wouldn't say, just that it's important. I talked to Mom about it that evening. We were having dinner at her new condo, just the two of us. Do you want me to go with you? She asked. No. If there's something he needs to say about you, I should hear it first. Decide if you need to know. The next day, I drove to the Toronto South Detention Center. The building was gray institutional. Inside it was all fluorescent lights and beige walls and the smell of industrial cleaner. They brought Jonathan into the visitor's room. He looked terrible. He'd lost weight. His hair was grayer than I remembered. His orange jumpsuit hung loose on his frame. Nancy, his voice cracked. Thank you for coming. I sat across from him, separated by plexiglass. I picked up the phone on my side. He picked up his. What do you want, Jonathan? I need to tell you something about Mom. He took a breath. She's sick, really sick. Terminal. My heart stopped. What said? That's why I did it. Why I took the money. His words came fast now, desperate. 2 years ago, Mom was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer. Stage 4. The doctors gave her 6 months. She didn't want anyone to know. She swore me to secrecy. Said she wanted to live her last days normally. I felt cold all over. You're lying. I'm not. Call her doctor. Dr. Catherine Walsh. She'll confirm it. He leaned forward. Nancy, I took the money for her treatments. Experimental treatments insurance wouldn't cover. I bankrupted myself trying to save her. The gambling that was before, but I stopped. I stopped 2 years ago when she got diagnosed. Everything I did after that was for her. Then why the fake funeral? Why pretend she died? Because she was supposed to be dead already. The treatments worked better than anyone expected. She's been in remission for 6 months, but I'd already taken the money for treatments that were supposed to cost twice what they did. I was trying to return it, but I'd made investments trying to grow the money back, and they failed. I panicked. Tears were streaming down his face now. I'm not a thief, Nancy. I'm not a monster. I was trying to save our mother's life. I stood up. Nancy, please. I hung up the phone and walked out. I drove straight to Dr. Catherine Walsh's office. I didn't call. I just showed up and refused to leave until she saw me. Mrs. Reynolds, she said, closing her office door behind us. I assume this is about your brother's claims. Is my mother dying? Dr. Walsh sat down at her desk. Your mother was diagnosed with early-stage pancreatic cancer 2 years ago, yes. But it wasn't stage 4. It was stage 1, highly treatable. We did surgery. She had chemotherapy. She's been cancer-free for 18 months. I felt like I'd been punched. So, Jonathan, your brother was involved in her medical care, yes, but the treatments were covered by her insurance. There were no experimental procedures, no secret battle for her life. Dr. Walsh's face was stern. Mrs. Reynolds, your brother is attempting to rewrite history, to make himself a hero instead of a criminal. I told Mom that evening. We sat in her living room, tea cooling on the coffee table between us. I'm sorry you had to hear that, she said quietly. About the cancer. Why didn't you tell me? Because I didn't want you to worry. It was early stage, the prognosis was good, and I was right, I beat it. She reached for my hand. Nancy, Jonathan knows about it because he drove me to a few appointments when you were dealing with Michael's estate. That's all. He had no special role. He didn't pay for anything. He's trying to justify the unjustifiable. He looked me in the eye and lied. Yes, that's what people do when they've run out of truth. Mom squeezed my hand. Nancy, your brother is in a hole so deep he can't see light anymore. He'll say anything, believe anything that makes him not the villain of his own story. Do you think he'll ever accept what he did? I don't know. Maybe prison will give him time to reflect. Maybe it won't. She smiled sadly. All I know is that I did what I had to do. I protected myself. I found the truth. And I learned who truly loved me. 2 months after the funeral that wasn't on a cold March morning, the trial began. The courthouse was packed. Media lined up outside. Linda Walsh from CBC was there, along with reporters from every major outlet. The prosecution's case was overwhelming. 127 hours of audio and video recordings, financial records showing every theft, testimony from the 3 nurses, Amy's text messages, Sarah's investigation reports. Jonathan's lawyer tried to argue diminished capacity due to stress, tried to paint him as a desperate man making bad choices under pressure, tried to bring up the cancer as a mitigating factor. The judge wasn't buying it. Mr. Reynolds, Judge Patricia Thornton said, looking at Jonathan over her glasses, you had resources, you had education, you had options. What you didn't have was integrity. You chose to exploit your mother's trust, fake her medical condition, and plan an elaborate fraud. These weren't snap decisions made under stress. This was a sustained campaign of abuse over 4 months. Jonathan was sentenced to 8 years in prison. Jennifer got 5. Both were ordered to repay the stolen money plus damages. Dr. Thomas Whitmore, the doctor who diagnosed Mom's dementia, received a 1-year suspension in community service. The investigation found he'd been negligent in his diagnosis, but not deliberately complicit. Jonathan had lied to him too, apparently. Another victim of my brother's web of deception. After the sentencing, Mom, Lisa, David, Amy, Mark, and I went to a quiet restaurant near the courthouse. We ordered wine. We toasted to justice, to family, to new beginnings. Grandma, Amy said quietly, can I ask you something? Of course, sweetheart. Do you regret it? The way you tested Dad and Aunt Nancy? Mom was quiet for a long moment. I regret that it was necessary. I regret that my own son could do what he did. But Amy, I don't regret finding out the truth. I'm 83 years old. I had to know who would love me when I had nothing left to give. She looked at me. Nancy came 3 times a week. She brought me lavender soap and read me poetry. She brushed my hair and held my hand. She loved me when she thought I couldn't love her back. That's what family does. Real family. What about Dad? Amy's voice was small. Is he still family? Blood doesn't make you family, sweetheart. Love does, choice does, showing up does. Mom reached across the table and took Amy's hand. Your father made choices that put him outside our family. But you didn't. Mark didn't. You're still here. You're still choosing us. That makes you family. Amy started crying. Mark put his arm around her. And sitting there in that restaurant watching my mother comfort her grandchildren, I realized something. Jonathan hadn't just tested Mom's defenses. He'd tested all of us. And we'd passed. Not because we were perfect, but because when it mattered, we'd chosen love over comfort, truth over peace, justice over family loyalty. We'd chosen what was right. And that, I thought as I raised my glass to toast my remarkable mother, was the real test all along. 3 months after the trial, life began to find a new rhythm. Spring came to Toronto, melting the last of the winter snow and bringing green back to the city. Mom had settled into her condo and joined a book club. Amy was thriving at York University. Mark had quit one of his jobs and was actually sleeping more than 4 hours a night. And me, I was learning how to be just Nancy again. Not Nancy the worried daughter, not Nancy the investigator, just Nancy. But some mornings I'd wake up and forget. I'd think about visiting Mom at Maple Grove, about checking on her, about making sure she was okay. Then I'd remember she was fine. She'd always been fine. And I'd feel that strange mix of relief and residual anger all over again. On a Tuesday in late April, Detective Morrison called me. Nancy, I thought you should know. Jonathan wants to see your mother. He's requested a family visit. My stomach clenched. Absolutely not. It's his right to request it. But she doesn't have to agree. He paused. He says he's written her a letter. Do you want me to screen it first? Yes, please. The letter arrived 2 days later, forwarded through Robert's office. I sat at Mom's kitchen table, the envelope between us, like something dangerous. Do you want me to read it first? I asked. Mom shook her head. We'll read it together. I opened it carefully. Jonathan's handwriting was shaky, not like his usual confident scrawl. Dear Mom, I don't expect you to forgive me. I don't expect you to even read this. But I need to write it anyway. Every night in here I dream about when I was 8 years old. Remember when I broke Dad's favorite fishing rod? I was so scared to tell you. But you sat me down and said, Jonathan, mistakes happen, but lying about them makes it worse. Always tell the truth, even when it's hard. I forgot that lesson somewhere along the way. You asked me once during one of my visits when you were sick why I never told you I loved you anymore. I pretended not to hear you. The truth is, I didn't think I had the right. Not when I was stealing from you. Not when I was lying to your face. I want you to know I started gambling because I was terrified. Terrified of being a failure. Terrified that everyone would see I wasn't as successful as I pretended to be. Each bet was supposed to be the one that fixed everything. Each loss made the next bet feel even more necessary. When you got sick, really sick with the cancer, I thought God was punishing me. For the gambling. For the debts. For being a terrible son. I drove you to those appointments, and I thought, this is my fault somehow. Then you got better, and I thought maybe I'd been given a second chance. But by then I'd already stolen so much. I'd already lied so much. The hole was so deep I couldn't see how to climb out. The funeral wasn't about the money anymore. It was about making all my lies true. If you were really gone, then all the things I'd done to prepare for you being gone would make sense. It's insane, I know, but that's where my head was. Nancy told me about your test, how you were pretending the whole time, how you were watching me fail every single day. I was angry at first. I thought, how could you do that to me, your own son? But I've had time to think. You weren't doing it to me. You were protecting yourself from me, because I'd already shown you who I'd become. Amy came to see me last week. She told me she's living with Nancy now, that you paid for her tuition, that she wants to be a nurse, but the kind who actually helps people, not the kind her mother was. She said Dad, Grandma didn't destroy our family. You did. She just made sure everyone could see it. She's right. Mom, I don't know how to be sorry enough for what I did. I don't know how to make this right. I'm in prison and I deserve to be here. But before you write me off completely, I need you to know you were right to test me. I'm glad you did. Because if you hadn't, I would have destroyed you, and I would have spent the rest of my life telling myself it was justified. At least now I have to face what I am, who I became. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I'm not asking for anything. I just wanted you to know that your son, the real one, the 8-year-old who cried when he broke that fishing rod, he's still in here somewhere. I'm trying to find him again. I love you. I should have said it more when I had the chance. Jonathan, Mom set the letter down carefully. Her hands were steady, but tears were streaming down her face. Nancy, she said quietly, I need to think about this. Over the next week, Mom was quieter than usual. She'd stare out her window at the Toronto skyline. She'd pick up books and put them down without reading. I knew she was wrestling with something big. Finally, on a Sunday afternoon, she called me. I want to see him. Mom, are you sure? No, but I need to. The following Tuesday, I drove Mom to the detention center. Detective Morrison had arranged a private room, not the plexiglass booths, but an actual room where they could sit across from each other at a table. Do you want me to come in with you? I asked as we sat in the parking lot. No, sweetheart. This is between me and my son. I waited in the visitor's lounge for an hour. When Mom finally emerged, she looked exhausted, but somehow lighter. What happened? I asked as we drove home. We talked. Really talked. For the first time in maybe 30 years. She stared out the window. He's broken Nancy. Completely broken. Prison hasn't made him hard. It's made him small. He cried. Apologized for things I'd forgotten about. Asked about Amy and Mark. What did you say? I told him the truth. That Amy is thriving without him. That Mark is healthier without the weight of his parents' expectations. That they're building lives based on integrity, not deception. She turned to look at me. And I told him that I forgive him. I almost swerved. You what? I forgive him. Not because what he did was okay. Not because I'm going to have a relationship with him, but because carrying that anger was making me sick. She smiled sadly. Nancy, forgiveness isn't for him. It's for me. I'm 83 years old. I don't have time to waste on bitterness. Does that mean you'll visit him again? No, I told him that too. I forgive him, but I'm not his mother anymore. Not in the way that matters. He made choices that severed that bond. Forgiveness doesn't mean pretending those choices didn't happen. That conversation with Mom changed something in me. I'd been carrying rage for months at Jonathan and Jennifer at the whole situation. But watching Mom let it go, I realized I didn't want to carry it anymore either. The next week, I went to see Jennifer. She was in the women's section of the detention center looking as broken as Jonathan had. Her nursing scrubs had been replaced with orange. Her usually perfect hair was pulled back in a messy ponytail. "Nancy," she said when they brought her in, "I didn't think you'd come. I didn't think I would either." We sat in silence for a moment. Then Jennifer spoke. "I know you hate me." "I did. I'm not sure I do anymore. Mostly I'm just sad." "Sad? Sad that you had everything, a job you were good at, 2 beautiful kids, a family, and you threw it away for money." I leaned forward. "Jennifer, why, you're a nurse. You know what elder abuse does to people. You've probably reported it yourself. What made you think it was okay to do it to Helen?" She was crying now, ugly crying that made her whole face red. "I don't know. I honestly don't know. It started small. Jonathan would say, 'Can you just check on Mom's medications? Make sure she's taking them.' Then it became, 'Can you add this to her chart? Then can you give her this instead?'" She wiped her nose with her sleeve. By the time I realized what we were doing, I was already complicit, already guilty, so I just kept going. "You had a choice. Every single day you had a choice." "I know," her voice broke. "Nancy, I wake up every morning and the first thing I think is, what did I do? I can't believe I did those things. It's like watching someone else's life, someone I don't recognize. The person who did those things is you, Jennifer, not some stranger. You." "I know," she whispered. I stood up to leave. Then I turned back. "Your kids, Amy and Mark, they're going to be okay. Despite you. Despite Jonathan. They're choosing to be better than what you taught them." "I'm glad." She actually smiled through her tears. "Tell Amy. Tell her I'm sorry I couldn't be the mother she deserved. Tell her yourself. Write her a letter. Give her the chance to decide if she wants to hear from you." Spring turned to summer. Amy moved into Mom's spare bedroom for a few months while she saved money. The two of them would stay up late, talking and laughing. Sometimes I'd come over and find them watching old movies, sharing popcorn, looking like any grandmother and granddaughter. One evening, Amy showed me a letter. "Mom wrote to me. Are you going to write back? I don't know. Part of me wants to. Part of me thinks she doesn't deserve it." She looked at me with those young, uncertain eyes. "What should I do? I can't answer that for you, sweetheart. But I can tell you this, forgiveness is a gift you give yourself, not them. Whether you have a relationship with your mother again is separate from whether you forgive her. You can forgive and still maintain boundaries. You can heal without letting her back into your life." Amy nodded slowly. I think I need more time." "Then take it. You have all the time in the world." In August, something unexpected happened. Linda Walsh from CBC called me again. "Nancy, I know your mother didn't want to talk to press before, but we've been commissioned to do a documentary on elder abuse. We'd love to include your family's story, with your permission, of course." I talked to Mom about it. She was quiet for a long time. Then she said, "Yes, let's do it." The documentary took 3 months to film. They interviewed Mom, Melissa, David, Amy, Mark. They talked to Detective Morrison, Robert Davis, Sarah Mitchell, even Patricia Maria and Yuki from Maple Grove. They didn't sensationalize it. They didn't make Mom a hero or Jonathan a monster. They just told the truth. An elderly woman facing the reality of aging decided to test the people who claimed to love her. And in doing so, she uncovered a plot that would have left her penniless and alone. The documentary aired in November. It was called The Final Test. Within days, it had been viewed millions of times. Mom started getting letters, hundreds of them, from people sharing their own stories. Adult children who'd stolen from elderly parents who were too afraid to report abuse. Families torn apart by greed and betrayal. But also stories of hope. People who'd recognized the warning signs and gotten help. Families who'd had honest conversations about power of attorney and finances. Communities that had set up support systems for vulnerable seniors. One letter in particular stood out. It was from a woman in Vancouver named Margaret Chen, 79 years old. Dear Mrs. Reynolds, I watched your story with tears streaming down my face. My son has been my power of attorney for 2 years. Recently, I noticed money missing from my accounts, bills being paid late, him being evasive when I asked questions. Before I saw your documentary, I was going to stay quiet. I didn't want to believe my own child would steal from me. I didn't want to tear apart my family. But your story gave me courage. I called a lawyer. I had him investigate. My son had taken over $100,000. When confronted, he broke down and admitted everything. He has a drug problem he's been hiding for years. Because of you, I protected myself before it was too late. We're getting my son help, real help in rehab. And I've transferred my assets to a trust managed by a professional. My son is angry now, but maybe someday he'll understand I saved him from becoming like your Jonathan. Thank you for being brave enough to share your story. You saved me. And maybe you saved my son too, in a way. With deepest gratitude, Margaret Mom read that letter over and over. Then she called Linda Walsh. I want to do more. Speaking events, workshops, whatever helps people. By December, Mom had spoken at 12 different events. She'd helped establish the Helen Reynolds Elder Protection Fund using the money Jonathan had been ordered to repay. The fund provided free legal assistance to seniors fighting financial abuse cases and funded educational programs about power of attorney responsibilities. On Christmas Eve, we gathered at Mom's condo. Me, Lisa David, and his family, Amy Mark. Even Robert Davis and Sarah Mitchell joined us. We were a strange patchwork family bound not by blood, but by what we'd survived together. After dinner, as we sat around Mom's living room with mugs of hot cider, Amy asked a question. Grandma, if you could go back, would you still do the test, knowing how it would turn out? Mom thought carefully. Yes, because Amy, I learned something more important than who would steal from me. I learned who would love me when I couldn't love them back. Nancy came to visit me 3 times a week. She brought me lavender soap and read me poetry. She held my hand and brushed my hair. She loved me when she thought I was gone. She looked around the room. That's what family is. Not the people who share your blood, but the people who show up, who stay, who choose you over and over again. What about Uncle Jonathan? Sophie David's 7-year-old asked innocently. Is he still family? That's complicated, sweetheart, Mom said gently. Jonathan will always be my son. I'll always love the little boy he used to be. But the man he became made choices that put him outside this family. Love isn't enough if there's no trust, no respect, no integrity. David spoke up. Mom, have you heard from him recently? He writes sometimes, short letters, telling me about prison programs he's in, therapy he's doing. She smiled sadly. I don't write back, but I read every letter, and I genuinely hope that he finds his way back to being someone worthy of the life he was given. In January, exactly 1 year after the fake funeral, we held a different kind of ceremony. At Mom's request, we gathered at a small chapel, the same Thornhill Funeral Home actually, but this time it was a celebration. I'm 84 years old, Mom said, standing at the podium, and I'm alive, really truly alive, not just breathing, but living with purpose and joy. She looked out at the assembled crowd, 50 people who'd supported her through everything. A year ago, some of you sat in this very room thinking you were attending my funeral. I'm sorry I put you through that, but I'm not sorry I discovered the truth. Here's what I've learned, she continued. Getting old is inevitable, but becoming vulnerable, that's a choice. I chose to test whether I was truly vulnerable or just perceived as such, and I learned I was stronger than anyone, including myself, believed. I learned that family is built, not born, that love is an action, not a feeling, that integrity matters more at 84 than it did at 24. Most importantly, I learned that it's never too late to protect yourself, to stand up, to demand the respect you deserve. Age doesn't make you helpless unless you allow it to. She raised her glass of sparkling cider. So here's to being alive. Here's to being strong. Here's to choosing who we let into our lives and who we keep out. And here's to second chances for those who've earned them. We all raised our glasses, and I realized looking around that room that this was Mom's real legacy. Not the money she'd protected. Not even the fund she'd established. But this, a room full of people who understood that love without respect is worthless, that family requires choice, and that we're never too old to protect ourselves. In March, 14 months after Jonathan's arrest, he came up for parole review. He didn't get it. According to his lawyer, he hadn't shown sufficient remorse. What does that mean? I asked Robert. It means he's still making excuses, still trying to justify what he did. The parole board sees through it. Robert sighed. Some people never accept responsibility for their actions, Nancy. They spend their whole lives being the victim of their own choices. Do you think he'll ever change? I don't know. Prison changes people, but not always for the better. Some people come out worse than they went in. He paused. But that's not your concern anymore, or your mother's. You both did what you had to do. How Jonathan chooses to spend his time in prison, whether he uses it for reflection or just builds better excuses, that's on him. That spring, Amy graduated from nursing school, top of her class. We threw her a party at Mom's condo, and Amy gave a speech that made everyone cry. I almost didn't make it here, she said, not because of grades or money, but because I almost let my parents' choices define me. I almost believed that coming from a family of thieves and liars meant I was destined to be one too. She looked at Mom. But Grandma showed me something different. She showed me that integrity isn't inherited, it's chosen, every single day. She chose to protect herself when everyone told her to trust blindly. She chose truth over comfortable lies, and she chose to build a new family from the people who proved they deserved to be in it. I'm becoming a nurse not to make up for what my mother did, but because I want to be someone who protects vulnerable people, who sees them as human beings, not opportunities, who remembers that the elderly, the sick, the confused, they're still people, still deserving of dignity and respect. She raised her glass. To Grandma, who taught me that the best revenge is living well, and that the best family is the one you choose. In June, on a warm Tuesday afternoon, I took Mom back to Maple Grove Care Center. Not to visit, she'd never set foot in the building again as a resident, but Patricia had invited her to speak to the staff. We sat in their conference room, 40 nurses and care aides, and Mom told her story. She didn't pull punches. She talked about how Jennifer had over-medicated her, how easy it had been to deceive trained professionals, how systems designed to protect the elderly had failed. But I'm not here to blame you, Mom said. I'm here to ask you to pay attention. If you see something that doesn't seem right, a patient suddenly declining a family member who's too interested in finances, medications that don't match the diagnosis, say something. You might save someone's life. During the Q&A, a young nurse raised her hand. Mrs. Reynolds, do you ever regret testing your children the way you did? Some people say it was cruel. Mom smiled. Some people haven't been 83 and wondering if they'll die alone and penniless because their own child robbed them. I don't regret finding the truth. I regret that the truth was so ugly. But knowing it, that saved my life. Patricia spoke up. Mrs. Reynolds helped us implement new protocols. Now we require 2 nurses to verify any medication changes. We have monthly financial literacy workshops for residents. We've created a confidential hotline for residents who suspect abuse. She smiled. Helen didn't just save herself. She's helping us save others. That evening as we drove home, Mom was quiet. I glanced over at her. What are you thinking about? I'm thinking about how much has changed in 18 months. How I went from testing my children to teaching strangers. How something so painful became something meaningful. She looked at me. Nancy, when I die, really die someday, I want you to know I lived my last years exactly as I wanted. On my terms, surrounded by people who chose to love me. Mom, I'm not being morbid. I'm being grateful. Most people don't get to design their ending. They don't get to choose who stays and who goes. I did, and that's a gift, even if it came wrapped in betrayal and pain. In September, 2 years after Mom's death, we held another family dinner. This time there was someone new at the table, Mark's girlfriend Elena, a sweet woman who worked as a social worker. So you're the famous grandmother, Elena said, shaking Mom's hand. Famous or infamous, depending on who you ask, Mom replied with a grin. Over dinner, Elena asked the question everyone was always too polite to ask. Mrs. Reynolds, do you miss your son? The table went quiet, but Mom didn't flinch. I miss the son I thought I had. The one I raised to be honest and kind. That son, though, he never really existed. Or maybe he did and I lost him somewhere along the way. She paused. But I don't miss the man Jonathan became. That man hurt me, betrayed me, tried to erase me. So no, I don't miss him. Do you think you'll ever have a relationship with him again? I don't know. Right now, no. He's still in prison. Still, from what I hear, not fully accepting what he did. But in 10 years, 20, if he truly changes, truly becomes someone different, she shrugged. I'm not closing that door forever, but I'm also not standing at it waiting for him to knock. That winter, I got a call from Linda Walsh again. Nancy, you're not going to believe this. The Final Test just won a Canadian Screen Award for Best Social Issues Documentary. Mom attended the ceremony in a gorgeous midnight blue dress. When they announced the win, she stood up with Linda and the production team. The cameras captured her on stage, this 84-year-old woman who'd outsmarted her own son, and the audience gave a standing ovation. In her acceptance speech, Linda said, "This documentary exists because one woman refused to be a victim. Helen Reynolds, thank you for trusting us with your story. And thank you for showing the world that being elderly doesn't mean being powerless." Mom just smiled and waved. Later at the after-party, reporters swarmed her. "Mrs. Reynolds, what would you say to other seniors who suspect they're being abused?" Mom looked directly into the camera. "Document everything. Trust your instincts. Get help. You're not crazy, you're not paranoid, and you're not a burden. You have the right to protect yourself at any age." "Do you have any regrets?" "Only one. I regret that my son made choices that forced me to test him, but I don't regret the test itself. It saved my life." On a cold February morning, 3 years after the fake funeral, I picked up Mom for our weekly breakfast. We went to our favorite diner on Queen Street, the one with the best pancakes in Toronto. As we waited for our food, Mom reached across the table and took my hand. "Nancy, I need to tell you something." My heart jumped. "Are you okay?" "I'm fine. Better than fine." She squeezed my hand. "I'm updating my will. Everything, the trust fund, the condo, the investments, it's all going to you, Lisa, David, Amy, and Mark. Split equally." "Mom, let me finish. I'm also creating a larger endowment for the Elder Protection Fund. $2 million. It'll run in perpetuity, helping people long after I'm gone." She smiled. "That's my real legacy. Not the money itself, but what it can do." "What about Jonathan?" "Jonathan will get nothing. That's stated explicitly in the will. Not out of spite, but as a natural consequence of his choices. He had everything. He chose to throw it away. That doesn't entitle him to a second chance at my expense." Our pancakes arrived, and we ate in comfortable silence. Then Mom said something that stuck with me. "You know what's funny? Jonathan wanted my money so badly, he was willing to fake my death for it. But the real treasure was right in front of him the whole time." "What do you mean?" "Love, family, trust. The things money can't buy." She took a sip of coffee. "He had all of that. We all did. And he traded it for dollars in an account. What a terrible bargain." That spring, 4 years after everything began, Amy got engaged. To a wonderful man named Daniel, a teacher she'd met through a volunteer program. The wedding was planned for September. One afternoon, as Amy and I addressed invitations at my kitchen table, she paused. "Aunt Nancy, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest." "Of course." "Should I invite my dad to the wedding?" I set down my pen. "What does your heart say?" "My heart says no. He hurt Grandma. He hurt all of us. He made choices that destroyed our family." She bit her lip. "But he's still my dad, and part of me feels guilty for cutting him out completely." "Amy, guilt isn't love, and obligation isn't family." "I know. But what if I regret it? What if someday I wish I'd given him a chance?" I thought carefully before answering. "Here's what I know: you can't build a relationship with someone who hasn't done the work to deserve one. Your dad is in prison because of choices he made. He's had 4 years to reflect, to grow, to change. Has he—" Amy shook her head. "He still writes me sometimes. The letters are always the same. I did it for the family. I was trying to help. If only Mom hadn't tested me, everything would have been fine. He still doesn't get it." "Then you have your answer. You're not cutting him out. He cut himself out when he chose theft over integrity. You're just acknowledging that reality." Amy nodded slowly. "Okay, No invitation, but I'll write him a letter, tell him why, give him one more chance to understand. The wedding in September was beautiful. Small, intimate, just 50 people. Mom walked Amy down the aisle since Amy's father was in prison, and her mother was, as Amy put it, dead to me in all the ways that matter. During the reception, Mom gave a toast that brought the whole room to tears. "I'm 85 years old," she said, standing with her champagne glass. "I've been to a lot of weddings in my life. I've seen marriages based on passion, on convenience, on obligation. But the best marriages, the ones that last, are built on choice. You choose each other every single day." She looked at Amy and Daniel. "Amy, you've already learned one of life's hardest lessons, that family is built, not born, that love is an action, not a feeling, and that the people who deserve to be in your life are the ones who prove it through their choices, not their words. Daniel, you're marrying into a family that's been tested by fire. We're stronger for it, but we're also cautious. We protect what we've built. We don't give trust freely anymore. If you're willing to earn it every day, you'll find no more loyal family in the world." To Amy and Daniel, may your marriage be built on choice, honesty, and the courage to protect what you love. 6 months after Amy's wedding in March, Jonathan came up for parole again. This time he got it. 5 years served, 3 years probation. He'd be released in 2 weeks. The news hit all of us hard. "What if he comes here?" Lisa asked at an emergency family meeting at Mom's condo. "He's not allowed to," Robert assured us. "Part of his parole conditions is no contact with your mother unless she initiates it. No contact with any family member unless they consent in writing. He violates that, he goes back to prison." "What about Amy?" Mark asked. "What if he shows up at her place?" "Same rule applies. She's filed a no-contact order. If he comes within 100 meters of her, he's arrested." Mom was quiet through all of this. Finally, she spoke. "I'm not afraid of him. Not anymore. Jonathan isn't dangerous. He's pathetic. And that in some ways is sadder." 2 weeks later, Jonathan was released. According to the lawyer, he moved into a halfway house in Scarborough. He got a job at a call center. He attended mandatory counseling sessions. Amy got a letter from him the day after his release. "Dear Amy, I know I'm not supposed to contact you, but I had to write this one last time. I'm out. I'm free. But I'm not really free, am I? I carry what I did with me every day. Every time someone asks about my family and I have to say I don't have one. Every time I see an elderly person and remember what I did to my own mother. The therapist in prison asked me once, 'What would you say to your 8-year-old self, the boy, before all of this?' I couldn't answer, because that boy would be ashamed of me. I don't expect you to forgive me. I don't expect anything. But I wanted you to know that you were right. What you said to me in prison, you didn't just destroy Grandma. You destroyed yourself. You were right. I hope your wedding was beautiful. I hope you're happy. I hope you build the kind of family I threw away. I'm sorry. Dad," Amy showed me the letter. Should I respond to "Do you want to?" She thought for a long time. "No, I think I just feel sad. Sad that he finally understands, but it's too late. The person who needed to hear his apology was the 22-year-old me who watched him get arrested, who had her whole understanding of family destroyed in one afternoon. That girl needed to hear he was sorry, but she doesn't exist anymore. I've moved on." That summer, 5 years after the fake funeral, Mom published a book. The Final Test: How I Exposed My Son's Elder Abuse. It became an instant bestseller. She donated all the proceeds to the Elder Protection Fund. She did book tours, speaking at libraries and community centers across Canada and the United States. And everywhere she went, people shared their stories. The son who'd stolen his mother's retirement fund. The daughter who'd forged her father's signature on property transfers. The families torn apart by greed. But also stories of prevention. People who'd had honest conversations about POA before it was needed. Families who'd set up checks and balances. Communities that had created support networks. At one event in Florida, an elderly man raised his hand during the Q&A. "Mrs. Reynolds, my son is my POA. After hearing your story, I'm scared. Should I take it away from him?" Mom smiled gently. "Is he giving you reason to be scared, or are you just afraid because of what happened to me?" I don't know." "Then here's what you do. Talk to him. Tell him your concerns. If he's trustworthy, he'll understand and work with you to create safeguards. If he's not, he'll get defensive and angry. Trust your instincts. You raised him. You know him. Listen to what he shows you, not just what he tells you. In December, 6 years after everything began, we gathered for Christmas at my house this time. Mom, Lisa, David and his family, Amy and Daniel, Mark, and Elena, who were now engaged themselves. After dinner, as we sat around the fireplace with mugs of hot chocolate, Sophie, now 13, asked a question. "Great-Grandma, do you think Uncle Jonathan will ever be part of the family again?" Mom looked at her thoughtfully. "That's up to Jonathan, sweetheart. He has to prove he's changed, and proof takes years, not months. Right now, he's still serving his probation, still rebuilding his life. If in 5 years or 10 he's shown through his actions that he's become someone different, then maybe we'll have a conversation." "But you forgave him, right? You said you forgave him." "I did. But forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting. It doesn't mean letting someone back into your life. Forgiveness means I don't carry anger toward him anymore. It means I hope he finds peace. But it doesn't mean I trust him. And family without trust isn't really family at all." On a quiet Tuesday in January, 7 years after the day Jonathan called to tell me Mom was dead, I took Mom back to Thornhill Funeral Home. Not for another event, just to visit. We stood in the chapel where it had all happened, where Jonathan had given his fake eulogy, where Mom had walked in alive and strong and changed everything. "You know what's strange?" Mom said. "This room, this moment. It's when I truly came alive. Not the day I was born. Not even the day I married your father, but the day I stood up for myself, in front of everyone I loved. Do you ever wonder what would have happened if you hadn't tested Jonathan, if you'd just trusted him? Every day." She sat down in one of the pews. "I'd be broke, probably in a state-run facility with no way to pay for care, maybe dead if he'd gotten desperate enough. I wouldn't have my condo, my independence, my purpose. The Elder Protection Fund wouldn't exist. All those people we've helped, they'd still be suffering in silence." She looked at me. "Nancy, I'm 86 years old. I've lived through a depression, a world war, the death of my husband, and the betrayal of my son. And you know what I'm happy. Really genuinely happy. Because I chose who gets to be in my life. I chose dignity over blood. I chose truth over comfort. Do you think you'll write a second book? Maybe. But this time about the aftermath. About rebuilding, about how you create family from choice rather than obligation." She smiled. "Want to co-author it with me. I thought about everything we'd been through. The pain, the betrayal, the slow healing, the way we'd built something stronger from the broken pieces." "Yes," I said. "I'd be honored." On a sunny afternoon in May, we gathered at a community center in Toronto. The Helen Reynolds Elder Protection Fund was opening its 5th office, this one dedicated to training healthcare professionals to recognize and report elder abuse. Mom, now 88 and using a cane but still sharp as ever, cut the ribbon. The room erupted in applause. During her speech, she said something I'll never forget. 9 years ago, my son tried to erase me. He failed. Not because I was stronger than him, but because I refused to be erased. I chose to fight. I chose truth. I chose myself. Today, we open this center so that others can make the same choice, so that being elderly doesn't mean being powerless, so that family becomes something you build through actions, not something you endure through obligation. She looked out at the crowd, hundreds of people whose lives had been touched by her story. My son's greatest gift to me was his betrayal, because it forced me to discover who I really was. And what I found was someone worth fighting for. That evening, as I drove Mom home, she dozed in the passenger seat. I looked at her, this remarkable woman who'd turned her worst nightmare into her greatest purpose, and I felt overwhelmed with gratitude. She'd tested her family and found truth. Painful, ugly truth. But in that truth, she'd also found freedom. Freedom to choose. Freedom to protect herself. Freedom to build a legacy that mattered. Blood doesn't make family. Love does, choice does, showing up does, and sometimes the bravest thing an 83-year-old woman can do is pretend to be helpless just to see who will help her when she can't help herself. That's what I learned from Helen Reynolds, my mother, my hero, the woman who taught me that dignity matters more than dollars, integrity matters more than inheritance, and real love shows up even when there's nothing to gain.